Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, predicting what this Ole Miss starting depth chart is going to look like heading into week one of the 2024 season. And this is an Ole Miss team that many of you guys know I'm extremely excited about heading into 2024. Now, not only is this, I think, the most talented team by far we've seen Ole Miss have, right? Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, Juice Wells, Walter Nolan, Princely U. I also think, and more importantly, arguably, it's the deepest team that we've seen Ole Miss have as well. And you talk about the goals that Ole Miss has. I mean, the standard is SEC championship, getting to the college football playoffs. And this Ole Miss team has sometimes lacked that depth late on in the season to win some of those big games. The depth that this Ole Miss team has, I think, is truly special. I think that's what sets this team apart. Want to get into some of my predictions on how these position battles play out during spring practice, fall camp. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the Ole Miss fans. Many of you guys know this has been a program that's been a blast to talk about, whether we're taking deep dives into this roster, covering the transfer portal additions. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And much more importantly, would love to hear from you guys as well in the comment section. I'm going to give you guys some of my predictions. I could go either way on a lot of these guys. Would love to hear your opinions in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Starting with the quarterback, we don't have any questions about Jackson Dart being quarterback one. I think what excites me most about Jackson Dart, and I've said this repeatedly, you've seen Jackson Dart continue to get better during his career. And what happens if Jackson Dart takes another step with the talent that he's going to be surrounded by? That's what excites me the most. I think Jackson Dart is in for potentially a Heisman caliber season for Ole Miss. Going to the wide receiver room, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to give you guys two different scenarios at this wide receiver position. And the first one is what you see on the screen, right? Trey Harris and Juice Wells on the outside, and a guy like Jordan Watkins at the slot, who I think really is underappreciated in terms of what he does for this Ole Miss offense. The second one I'm going to give you is what happens if Deion Smith or Aiden Williams really breaks out, right? Aiden Williams going into year two, you saw them try to get Aiden Williams onto the field as a true freshman, and we all know how talented Deion Smith is. Both guys that can work at the boundary. If either Deion Smith or Aiden Williams really emerge, I wonder if you kick Juice Wells into that slot, have Aiden Williams or Deion Smith on the outside, and then you have Trey Harris, Deion Smith or Aiden Williams, and then Juice Wells in the slot. Now, Jordan Watkins is no slouch. I'm not trying to kind of squeeze him out of this wide receiver room. I'm just more kind of recognizing that you could really see Aiden Williams or Deion Smith, two guys that probably start on a lot of Power 5 programs across the country, emerge as guys that you kind of have to figure out how to get onto the field. But I'm going to stick with Trey Harris, Juice Wells, and Jordan Watkins because, again, I think Jordan Watkins is a very good slot wide receiver and a guy that Jackson Dart has a lot of chemistry with. Now, going to the tight end room really quick, Caden Prescorn is your tight end one. I think he's the most well-rounded, complete tight end on this roster. But Daquan Wright, a guy that runs an 11-second 100-meter, who's 245 pounds, who was extremely productive at Virginia Tech, an offense that really couldn't push the ball down the field at all. I'm not counting out Daquan Wright to be a guy that I think certainly makes a move for this Ole Miss offense in 2024. But again, Caden Prescorn, going to be my starting tight end at the running back spot. You guys know I'm excited about Ulysses Bentley. This is a guy that I think you saw at times him run the football better than Quinshon Judkins in 2023. And I think given more opportunities, Ulysses Bentley has that game-breaking ability. And you look at this Ole Miss offense trying to get their guys in space. I'm really excited to see what Ulysses Bentley can do as kind of that full running back one. And make no mistake about it, Logan Dix, Kendrick Riscano, they're going to get their reps, but I have Ulysses Bentley winning that running back route. Now, I think the big question mark is how this offensive line shakes out. You go to the transfer portal, bring in a couple of guys that I really like. Now, starting at that left tackle spot, I think Diego Pounds is kind of a lock to start at left tackle. He was phenomenal at North Carolina in 2023, was doing some digging into the numbers, 430 pass pro opportunities, only gave up 13 pressures in 2 sacks. Looked really good against teams like Clemson, who, again, have some of the better edge rushers that you see in the country. And I think Diego Pounds comes right in and kind of emerges as one of the better tackles in the SEC. Now, working to the inside, I'm going to go with both of the transfers from Washington and Nate Kalepo and Julius Buelow to start at your guard spots. These are two guys that played a lot of football for the offensive line that won the Joe Moore Award last year. And then on the center spot, I think you got a really interesting kind of position battle between a couple of different guys, right? Reese McIntyre, I think, played really good. Jerquan Scott plays exceptionally well at the group of five level at Southern Miss. I'm going to stick with Caleb Warren, and then I'm going to go Micah Pettis at the right tackle spot. I think Micah Pettis has a lot of juice left to be squeezed in terms of what he can be going in to his fourth year of college football. So my starting offensive line, Diego Pounds, Nate Kalepo, Caleb Warren, Julius Buelow, and I'm going Micah Pettis at right tackle. Would love to get some feedback on the offensive line, but I think more importantly, you look at this offensive line and you're saying, all right, Jerquan Scott, Jeremy James, even a guy like Jaden Williams, these are guys that Ole Miss feels comfortable playing if they need to. The depth on this offensive line, the competition that's going to be in this offensive line, I think is really exciting for Ole Miss fans. Now moving to the defensive side of the football, this is where I think it gets really interesting. Now starting with that defensive line, Jared Ivey, JJ, Walter Nolan, Princely U, not many questions there. I think the question that I want to talk about is how do you use Suntarian Perkins. I'm going to get that right consistently at some point. Suntarian Perkins. The more I watch Suntarian Perkins, the more I think he could kick back to a linebacker spot. I don't know if you want to see him rush off the edge, right? We all see the juice that he has as an edge rusher, but I think he's more of a Harold Perkins guy where he's playing off the ball, and then in certain spots, you can kind of slide him in as an edge rusher. And I think the whole idea here is you got to try to figure out a way to get him on the field more. And I don't know if it's going to be for Princely U, who is one of the best pass rushers that we see in the SEC. It's not going to be for Jared Ivey. So what I'm saying I think might happen, or at least maybe what I would do, is kick Suntarian Perkins back to that off-ball linebacker spot and line him up right next to the Chris Paul Jr., who I think that would work out really well. Because Chris Paul Jr., what is special about him? He has a ton of experience, has played at a high level in the SEC. That's a perfect kind of linebacker to play Suntarian Perkins next to, where you can ask Suntarian Perkins to kind of be a rover, have a lot of different responsibilities, do a lot of different things when you have a linebacker like Chris Paul Jr. that is as solid as he is. That's by far my most exciting storyline for Ole Miss during spring practice, during fall camp, is how are we getting Suntarian Perkins more involved in this defense? Because the way I see it is he's way too talented not to have him on the field on a consistent basis. So I'm going to go Chris Paul Jr. and Suntarian Perkins as your starting off-ball linebackers. Working to the back end, again, some really interesting position battles for Ole Miss, but I think this is a really loaded group. Now, at the cornerback spots, Trey Amos, I think, is a lock start. He was going to be probably cornerback 1 for Alabama in 2024 had he not transferred. He comes to Ole Miss. I think Trey Amos is going to be a phenomenal cornerback for Ole Miss. Now, on the other side, many of you guys know I'm a Michigan fan, very familiar with Amarian Walker. I'm actually not going to take Amarian Walker. And I think he is certainly a guy that could be a starter. You guys all know the movement skills, the length, the athleticism that Amarian Walker has is truly special. We just haven't seen it at the college football level yet. But another guy that I would classify as a special athlete is Chris Graves, who transferred late from Miami to Ole Miss. You saw him get really involved late in the season for Ole Miss. And this is a guy that very similar conversation to Amarian Walker, who played wide receiver coming out of high school, made the transition to cornerback, comes in late to Ole Miss. This is a guy that I thought played really good football towards the end of that season in 2023, and a guy that's only going into his third year of a new team, of a position that he's still kind of learning. I think there's a lot of upside to Chris Graves, and if he develops, I think you're looking at a really good starting cornerback. But I think what's exciting for Ole Miss fans is you have two guys in Amarian Walker and Chris Graves that the upside that they have, not many other cornerbacks across the country have. And so if one of those guys emerges and kind of reaches that upside, you're looking at a really good cornerback opposite Trey Amos. I'm going to go Chris Graves. Now at the nickelback spot, Yam Banks is really good. I watched a little bit of him coming from South Alabama, but I'm going to go John Sanders Jr., who I thought was really good for Ole Miss. He does a lot of things that you want to see from that nickelback role. He's good in coverage. He doesn't miss many tackles. I'm going to go John Sanders Jr., but again, really good competition, and you might even see John Sanders or Yam Banks maybe go back to that safety position because both of those guys, in my mind, really, really good and going to be hard to keep off the field. And at that safety spot, I'm going to stick with Trey Washington, who I think played really good for Ole Miss in the back end last year. But I'm going to go with Lewis Moore from Indiana. I think Lewis Moore is a really, really good player. Again, familiar with him from the Big Ten, doesn't miss tackles, is really good in coverage, has a very good feel for the game. But again, at the end of the day, I mean, Key Lawrence has played a ton of football at Oklahoma. He comes to Ole Miss, can do a lot of different things, play the nickel role, play the box safety role. I think the most interesting conversation for the back end of this Ole Miss secondary is how do you use all of these puzzle pieces? Because you got what, 7, 8 guys that we feel pretty comfortable about. How do you get them all on the field? How do you get them in the best spots to be successful for this Ole Miss defense? At the end of the day, Ole Miss is in a really good spot. They have so much talent. They have so much depth. And now the kind of trick is, how do we get all of these guys on the field and how do we put them in positions that they can go out and be successful? But you look at this Ole Miss team through top to bottom, there's not many holes in this depth chart. And when you combine a complete team with the top end talent that Ole Miss has, that's when you get a special team in college football. And I think this Ole Miss team can be really special in 2024. That's my prediction for this Ole Miss roster. Really appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And of course, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. And we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.